A special thank you to the HVAC School, for Techs by Techs.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of people referring to that.
Yeah. Well, people I know, I think he's best player.
I would agree.
All right.
I look up to Micheal.
It's hard to be me. Nate Adams, Cleveland, Ohio. Energy Smart Home Performance is our practice, and then we're rolling out a new program called HVAC 2.0. Building performance into the HVAC.
Did you notice I have your very special neckler?
Sweet.
Yeah, man.
Can anybody hear us? It feels like their mic is a little light.
Yeah, well, sharing a mic kind of sucks.
Yeah, talk into it. That's what the man just said. Talk into the mic.
Yeah,
Speak up.
we pretty much have to kiss each other to do that.
Well, that's fine.
It's like I like Housh, but there is a limit here.
Both very attractive.
Yeah, my name's Bryan. I'm Leilani's husband.
Apt description.
Steve Rogers, the Energy Conservatory.
Fantastic. Cool. So what we'll do real quick is we'll start.
Is Bill not coming?
He's going to be late.
Dang.
So he'll be here. We'll do an introduction for him.
Okay, fair enough.
So real quick, what is everyone most excited about in regards to advances in building science and why? Like what's happening right now in the atmosphere of the building science world that you guys are most excited about?
Let's start with Nate Adams.
Sure.
Yeah.
He's got a great answer.
Why do you have to do that to me, Brian? All right, so I want to start by thanking Bryan because he let me take the stage at the HVAC RTFM conference. Like I'm sure there's like 3 names for it, but I just like to read the fabulous manual.
Read the fantastic manual.
Oh,
Fabulous.
fantastic!
Fabulous. It's also
Fabulous.
Yes.
Hated it. But anyway, I gave a presentation on what we call badass HVAC. And one of the huge pieces of it is reheat dehumidification. And not one, but 2 different manufacturers have reached out. I don't know for sure that's going to happen, but the fact that we're getting noise like the day of, the day after, is pretty amazing. So thank you, Bryan, for building a community that actually had a kind of reach.
Go me.
What's that? Oh, sure. So I might as well define reheat dehumidification. So, like say you got, it's 72 degrees out, but the dew point's almost 70. There's really no cooling load, but there's a lot of humidity that you need to deal with. So an air conditioner takes out heat and humidity. So if you're not going to cool the air, you have to add the heat back in somehow. And we have come to prefer electric reheat for residential, like commercial, residential, because almost every standard heat pump system has it in there already. It looks like the resistance coils are back up. Sweet. Okay. Housh, what are you excited about?
I mean, you stole my thunder, so I was going to say the reheat as well. And, at this event, I've been trying to lean on some thermostat manufacturers because it should be a fairly easy upgrade for everybody. And also, I've seen some cool products here. I'm a hydronics guy, and so I've seen some nice air-to-water heat pumps that I'd love to get in the residential setup and think that we can do reheat with that as well. But from my perspective, I'm with Nate that it's reheat is on the list, and then, of course, HVAC 2.0.
Steve?
So what I'm most excited about is it seems like things are changing. Just casual conversations with people that I've talked to, it sounds like there's young guys taking over their father's business, and they're thinking, that's the way we've done it for 30 years. That's not good enough for me. I want to learn more. And the tools are better than ever. People's attitudes seem to be changing. Bryan's a big part of that, just giving people access to the knowledge that they have. And I'm excited that things look like they're changing.
That's awesome. Bryan, do you have anything to weigh in on?
Why, you just figure I don't know anything about building performance, so I'm not going to say anything? Is that what it is? Do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I'll just jump in.
Okay,
Yes.
fair enough. Fair
Come
enough.
on,
Fair
come
enough.
on, let's go.
No, so yeah, I'm really excited because I'm a traditional technician. You know, I like to show up and fix broken stuff and see it running when I'm done and get out as quick as I can. You know, it's like that's still what I prefer to do. It's weird, but that's not the best way. And we're embracing a view of comfort and of the structures that we work on with a mind towards solving bigger problems. Problems that people maybe didn't know that they even had, and maybe they didn't have before, but now they do have as structures get tighter, as dew points continue to increase. See, when I say as dew points continue to increase, nobody catches on that I'm kind of mentioning global warming. Do you notice that? Just say dew points continue to increase. So you got to be snaky. You can get around politics if you're snaky.
Just because the coils are warmer.
Well, yeah. Also, there's another factor there. Yeah, that's actually a really good one. Warmer coils. So there's all these factors that we're seeing now. We are seeing equipment that is going one direction, efficiency, and as it does that, actually being less effective when it comes to the thing we care about probably most in our market, which is dehumidification. And so probably of all the things I think about related to building performance is dehumidification. So yeah, I'm excited about that, but I'm also excited just about looking bigger, looking broader, thinking more widely about building performance for everybody involved, whether you're a building scientist or you're a technician. But I tend to think from the technician's perspective, which is maybe not quite as far-reaching as somebody like Steve. Every time I hear him talk about airflow, it's like my mind blows and I feel like I shouldn't even be doing this anymore. But just, you know, we're not all... the math is hard for me, Steve. I'm home teached, and it's rough. Okay. Anyway, so that's that.
I'll be your tutor.
What about you, Kaleb? Tell us more.
You're here on what you just said, by the way, really on what everyone said. But I really like it's really more of a build on what you guys have said. The idea of big picture diagnosis, as I believe Christine just called it. Is it still? Hello. So, yeah, it's looking at the envelope as a whole and looking at it as part of the duct system as well. It's these concepts that, you know, from a technician first, you're learning how to also kind of adopt a portion of your brain to access the engineering mindset as well. You have to have a marriage of the two. You have to. In order for building science to work, to scale, which is actually leads me to my next question. I guess, really, for the two of you, you can both answer. I have a question for you, Housh, but specifically scaling, what's your strategy to scale building science for your average contractor?
Offer decline. I mean, it's really given them the choice. It's also, as technicians, it's hard for us to slow down, kind of as others have alluded to, that we want to get in and solve problems, right? And so we get blinders on and don't look at the big picture. I think, as you said, Kaleb, the engineering mindset can be hard to tap in, especially there's risks, right, between HVAC guys. Oh, these engineers are stupid, right, or why they do this, and in reality, we really need to step back and look at things. And so for us, it's an offer decline is what comes to be the thing I think that will make it scale, because as you get deeper in the building science knowledge, you then it then makes it hard to not always want to go that far with everything, and not every customer wants a building science solution, and that's okay. It's their home, it's their money, and so the problem with a lot of home performance programs in the past, once incentives and things run out, it sinks the ship. And so really integrating into a current business model is important. in my opinion. So that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Let me add real quick, because I think that is a key point in a lot of different segments of our industry, is that economic sustainability is so key. And whenever we interfere in the marketplace in ways that don't also consider economic sustainability, you can actually do more harm than good in the long run. It's just like rolling out a tool. You know, like we can all relate to that. You get this tool and you're super excited about it, and then it sucks, right? Well, now you don't give it another chance, right? And this is what happens, I think, in a lot of people with business when we see these economic booms and busts and all this, is people get super gun shy. And this has happened a lot on the sustainability, whether it's because of green initiatives or whether it's because of energy savings or all these sorts of things, where it's sort of this overpromise, underdeliver, where at the end of the day people end up going into business and they can't sustain themselves because things change. And we have to think about more in terms of offer. Let them decide and have good science behind the things that we offer. And then when somebody declines it and then it doesn't work and they get mold, well, then that's what they chose, right? It's
You want to try it now?
Right. Yeah. Now you. How do you like me now? Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Now your house is infested with mold,
And it's all your fault.
I'm not allowed to say. Am I allowed to say? I'm saying the M word. You are. You need to calm down. Moisture.
It'll
It's infested with moisture. There you go.
So, Bryan, I should say that I fully agree with you. I really think that is we haven't had the whole efficiency programs over both our lifetimes, frankly. I think there actually would have been a market by now, and instead it's just been repeatedly beat back. I mean, my insulation company, which is the second phase of my step into this world, I closed it down, and the efficiency program structure was a big chunk of it. So, and to answer your question, Kaleb, of what's coming, if we're going to see building become a scale, we need a scalable system of some sort that your average tech can go out there and do. You need to be able to do this with $15 or $20 an hour talent. Oh, thank you. So, if we expect to have only Michael Jordan level talent to be able to do building performance work, we're going to fail. There's one Michael Jordan. If we can get the JV team, yeah, sure, thank you. But if we can create a way for people just to have a decent on-ramp into it, and just something easy, fun, that has much lower odds of failure. Actually, Eric Baller, who's programming the HVAC 2.0 programming, he said a little while ago, was like, yeah, losing money isn't sustainable. So if we're going to talk about sustainability, we better darn well figure out this model. So that's something that we have been really working hard on.
I think that's something that, making it profitable, if it's going to grow, I think there has to be some sort of a model to figure out how to make it profitable. And I think most of the people in this crowd are kind of at the tip of the spear and recognize the changes that they want to see happen. But it's really not going to catch fire until some people that are farther behind start to see that somebody else is eating lunch. And so I keep thinking about what economically is going to move the industry. How do we get more Peloses and less, Jim's HVAC company? Yeah, truck and truck.
Yeah. Or Jim. Yeah, whoever Jim is, Bob. Anything to add?
Yeah, I
As
thought.
far as scaling it?
Oh, well, as far as scaling it, yeah. I mean, I think Nate's doing great work when it comes to thinking about how do we simplify this. I mean, it's up to us in the nerd community to work out all these little details. I mean, there was this great conversation that happened at the symposium where they're arguing about a fairly small detail, right? I mean, we can agree that it's a detail, but it's good to do that. It's super important. But we all recognize that there is such a small subset of anybody who cares about this stuff, and it's great that they do, and it's good that they're in a room doing it. But we have to all start to settle on this is what it can look like for the rest of us. This is what it can look like for people who, if they just want to show up, do a job, and go home in the evening, because that's going to be the bulk of people who do any given trade. I mean, we're excited that there are more people who are excited, and that's great. But not everybody's going to even come to a thing like AHR, let alone something like our little goofy, Woodstock of HVAC that we had, mostly without the nudity.
Or the jokes.
There was that one time. Wow, that was rough. Anyway, so I think we do have to get really realistic about it, because while we can't, just using a traditional HVAC metaphor here, while we can't accept beer can cold, we also know that most technicians don't really understand superheating. Like, they know how to charge to it, but they don't really understand it, and we're never going to get most of them to really understand it.
Software tools.
Exactly, and that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think there are people who would disagree with me about this, but I think there are some fundamental changes which require us to just accept that some people are never going to really understand a psychometric chart. But that doesn't mean that they can't understand the relationships between dew point, wet bulb, dry bulb. You know, the software makes it so much easier. I don't use the psychometric chart when I want to figure out, what two of those factors are anymore. I use an app, right? And it's good if they can learn the psychometric chart. And should we still encourage them to learn it? Absolutely. But do we lead with that as a business model? The answer is no. I think no.
No, I think you leave with tools like Measure Quick, and we can maybe set the duct blader aside and encourage things like Right Soft. I'll echo what Alex Meany said before. Don't do the math, guys. That's why we have software.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tool.
And the other thing of it is taking a step back, looking at the market at a much broader scale. If you think about how technology diffuses, like how new things happen. In the beginning, you just get a few people that come out. Those are your early adopters. We're the geeks. Everybody here is an early adopter, if not even before that. I can't remember the name.
Leading edge.
Yeah.
Leading edge.
Leading edge.
Need to get hurt. Bad. A lot. All the time.
What we want to get into
Make it
is
stop.
the fat part of that. All right, Bryan. So I love how you're interrupting that.
I
I'm
do
totally
that.
doing this to you.
I do that. It's fine. It's fair.
coming again.
Go ahead. Please keep talking.
But when you look at the curve, it's a bell curve. So how do we design something that can actually get into the bell curve where it's the pragmatists we need to deal with? I mean, Bryan, when it comes to this, you're a pragmatist. When we talked the last time, you're like, I'm really interested in all this stuff, but how do I have it not kill my company? That is a pragmatist question. I want it to be better, but I've built a large company over a number of years. I don't want to destroy it over an idea. And you're absolutely correct.
Because that serves no one. That's the thing we have to realize. And I'm so thankful for people like Joe Stebrick, as an example, who do take the bull by the horns and talk about really, deep concepts. That's so important. But to make it a business, it has to be a business and it has to work. And the economic model, let's get back to what I was saying earlier, the economic model has to work. I mean, you guys have to realize Nate is probably the most obsessive, electrify everything. He wants the entire country to be off fossil fuels. I mean, this guy is this guy literally has he's married to a tree. I mean, he hugs a tree every night. That's how much he loves nature. But pragmatically, don't tell your bride that I said that. Yeah, so it's only on a podcast, so everybody can hear it later. That's fine. So when you care about these things deep enough, you have to kind of lay aside your idealism to a certain degree in order to help make it common. And I think that's what we're all, at least to some degree, varying degrees obviously, but committed to seeing accomplished here.
Absolutely. So that actually kind of leads into the next question, and talking about concepts. This is a question for you, Steve. Looking at your average contractor or technician, what are some of the challenges that you see they face most when trying to wrap their head around some of the building science concepts? Really just, duct tightness, envelope tightness. Of course, we know the importance of those things, and we can expound on that. But specifically, what you see they struggle with, how would you combat against that?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to recognize that there's some of the techs that they're willing to go down the rabbit hole and learn, but not everybody is. And so, how do we figure out which people are going to go down the rabbit hole and help those people to teach the ones who just say, this is how you ought to do it. Kind of like Nate says, you can't have everybody be Michael Jordan of building science and HVAC. And so it's about building a community, I think, and helping people understand that, okay, if Junior's bedroom is too hot in the summertime, it might be because there's a massive envelope leak in the corner of Junior's bedroom. It might be because Junior's duct is disconnected in the attic. It might be because you got an air balancing problem and all the air is going to the other bedrooms. And so, and there are ways to find that out. But and technicians can understand those three things, I think, fundamentally. Does everybody need to be, to know all the details? No, but we can build tools, we can make measurements, we can help the average tech figure out why is Junior's bedroom too hot.
Absolutely, and that I see a lot of struggle sometimes with contractors and other technicians. They have a hard time looking away from the appliance itself because it's the box that they sold, and so that's should be the problem, right? It's another, going back to that big picture diagnosis, it's looking at the big picture.
Yeah, step one, it might be the ducts. Step two, it might be the envelope,
Right.
I think, so one of my thoughts on this and what's hard to gain adoption, at least like in my company, for example, is that until they experience something or, like it's really helped doing some things on my employees' homes, right? Because it makes it tangible to them. And so with the average tech or someone, it may be difficult because they don't have that experience, or it takes fixing someone's home and then the customer, then you get that satisfaction from the customer feedback or whatever. And so these feedback loops are really important as well, but for most of us, it takes, and I don't like the hands-on learner term necessarily, but it takes something real to make us become a believer in it, and so that is something that is hard to kind of navigate through, especially, and I'm a small company, and so it's bound to be even harder as it tries to scale to larger organizations, because you do need at least a buy-in of it, like they don't need to know it, but they have to buy into this is what we do, and these are the steps that we need to take from here.
I love what you just said about people's own homes. I totally agree. Nothing ignites the passion in somebody like figuring out what's wrong and what can be better in their own home. We just brought a new sales and marketing guy on board, and I said, after about a month, I said, you and Paul, our tech support guy, you're going to spend all day in your house. You're going to measure everything, and you're going to come back tomorrow and you're going to tell me what you learned. And I knew that he would learn a lot, but more importantly, I knew that would ignite the passion, and it did.
We got to see this in person at your house. We sat down, the three of us, on a relations program, CSR. We went through the whole thing, and I wasn't totally sure if she was along, and there weren't a whole lot of pain points. And then we got to the budget steps. Okay, so if you're renting this place, how much do you pay per month to make all these things go away? And I'm thinking like $10. She spits out $300. But she had seen everything. It was an item. So actually one of the early steps is going to be a requirement, your requirement. You need to run this at least one tech's house. You need to run it for the CSR. Because once you've seen it, felt it, and understood it, it's much easier to talk about it. You aren't selling it at that point, you're just telling a story. And the stories are often accessible.
Yeah, a good example of this within our company is, so first off, we have a crazy amount of family members who work in our business, so forgive this. I mean, because as I start to describe who these people are, it gets a little confusing. But one of my many brother-in-laws who work with me is a younger guy. His name is Tyler. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's in his early 20s, maybe 24, something like that. He had worked as a technician for many years. I had to let him go once, and finally came back. very, very personable, traditional technician personality, traditional salesperson personality, very dynamic. People really like him. They're just naturally, people like him. And so because of that, he relies on that. So being technical was never something that he did without being kind of forced and coaxed into it. But he sells an insane amount of air conditioners and good ones too, like not just cheap stuff, but like good stuff. But the building science thing, it's a little on the tough side, So we struggled through with that, and we would have these really great meetings, and I would give him these really good classes. And he would hear me, but then he wouldn't apply it because he could sell equipment without it. So why? Kid can sell $2 million of equipment in a year. Why would he listen to me and my goofy building science stuff, right? So, but then we had this series of unfortunate events that occurred. Of course, as always do, where this one guy, he did a duct design for him, but it was way too vague, and then the guy ended up kind of going off the rails and became a so thing. And so then after that, he took duct design seriously. And then we had this one thing with humidity, where we installed some ductless systems to do an entire house, and it was not that one. That's a different one. We just installed some ductless systems to do an entire house, and sensible heat ratio. Oh, okay, well that's actually a thing, and now we need supplementary dehumidification. Well, that hurts. And then we had another house, which was the customer said they wanted to keep it at 70 degrees all the time at 50% relative humidity in the envelope. So not in the envelope, but in the conditioned space. Well, we can do that. But guess what happens in Florida when you make a space 70 degrees when the dew points outside are 80 in some cases, plus in an unventilated attic. You have a rainforest in everywhere but the conditioned space, right? And I don't know what's going on. I'm like, you remember that whole conversation that we had like 50,000 times where I told you that you can't give the customer what they want in those circumstances unless you disclaim everything, unless they are choosing it, quote everything, and how could we solve it? You know how we could solve it. We've done it 1,000 times, So these successive pain points have resulted in him now selling solutions that he always rolled his eyes that I would tell him before. He recently, just a couple days ago, because I remember when I first started talking to him about the SD12, which is an ultra-air dehumidifier that also provides a little bit of sensible cooling. And when I first showed him the price point on it, he's like, no way will I ever sell one of those. Never in a million years. And he sold his first one on a freestanding customer on a pretty regular house, but a case where the loads were already really tight and we couldn't afford to add the additional. I mean, I know you would disagree with this, but it's a long story.
There's different ways
It's
to solve
a
everything.
long story. Okay, all right. And whenever I say it was already undersized, Nate, you just completely dismiss that. So that's fine. That's fine. Did you analyze the power bills yet? No, Nate, I didn't analyze the power bills yet. Okay, fair enough. We'll keep going. So anyway, so he sells. Sells I was going to say a price, but I shouldn't do that because people can hear this later. It's an expensive product to a customer that previously he never would have thought would have ever gone for it. But the advantage is we know it will solve the problem. It will solve the problem they're having all the way. And that's the thing that I'm convincing them to, which is what you talk about all the time, which is if you can potentially charge a lot of money to really solve a problem versus leaving somebody in the, what do you call that, the valley of despair? What's that called again?
Gulf of disappointment.
Gulf of disappointment. Valley of despair, same thing. Yeah. Instead of leaving someone in the gulf of disappointment. I talked about that.
But it's going back to the that fishbowl concept that I think Christoph Irwin talks about a lot. Maybe he didn't know that, but that we're constantly 90% of the human life is indoors, whether it's inside a car, inside a building, or in our homes, and we're submerged in air. And what's the quality of that air like? And that's making it personal. It's that connection with the importance of building science and why we need it, why we need to control indoor air quality and mean radiant temperature, and all of these concepts, because it's personal, it directly affects us. So Housh as a contractor, doing, you're implementing 2.0, HVAC 2.0. What are some of the challenges that, obviously we know you're the accept decline concept, but what are some of the failures? Like, obviously we all learn from failures, and for the average contractor out there who's maybe thinking about implementing 2.0, what are some of the lessons that they could learn from you that maybe you had to learn the hard way?
Well, I think for us, it's been getting like a good script. First off, it really falls apart a little bit if it's not done from the first conversation you have with the people. And so one of the biggest challenges that we've had is implementing that CSR type of script, and we've tried and batted around different things, even tried to transition on site, like during a free quote or something like that, and that wasn't working, and that's when I kind of came to the realization that it really has to be consistent message from the get-go, and when the customer calls to schedule an appointment, you need to give them the offer on the phone, and most people are not going to go the building science path at that point, but it makes it an easier transition on site if that's the case, because you've been consistent. You've hit them with this information multiple times before you've been there even, and with Nate's free chapters are super helpful in this, and so that's probably one of the biggest struggles, and would likely be, it would be way more challenging without the free content to give them as well. So it's really like use everything at your disposal kind of thing.
I like what you said, Micheal, about multiple contacts. I think a lot of times we have to be realistic and say, every living room you walk into isn't going to be able to realistically afford the whole solution or even get out of the gulf of disappointment. But maybe in a couple years they'll remember you. Maybe in a couple years we've got a better job and now we can move out of the gulf of disappointment. But that multiple points of contact, and for some customers this might be a 15-year project to really achieve the comfort they want, and maybe it's okay to say, we have to leave you in the gulf of disappointment because you just can't afford to get where you want to be, but let's keep this going, keep the conversation going. I know I've heard Nate talk about people calling back after long periods of time and saying, I think we want to do this now.
I just had another one, 4 years old. We bought another house. We have to go do another plan, and he just submitted the lead. I'm almost annoyed because I need to focus more on 2.0 and get out of the field. And I'm getting dragged back in time again. But yes, it's a multiple contact thing. I mean, the easiest way to look at it, even if it's ever so slightly crude, is it's like the beginning of a relationship. It can be a one-night stand or it can be a relationship. And most contractor relationships really are one-night stands, particularly when I was an installation contractor. Well, not that way, jeez, Bryan. I expect you to have a clean mind here.
It's okay, there. You started it. Come on.
I know, but I didn't expect Bryan of all people to be taking it with his eyes, no less, to a deeper level. But when I was an installation contractor, I would quote them, and I got to where I was so busy that I didn't necessarily show up at every job as it was happening. So I might only see something once. Where the more touch points you can have, it's like asking someone to marry you. You don't ask on the first date. Homeschool kids do that, right?
Yeah, we do. We also get married really young too.
Yeah, well, I remember that part. But there's a process. It's multiple dates, and you meet the parents and all that stuff. And having a relationship is a much better way to go. We had people over for dinner that are clients. I didn't know you. Their friends now. And that's really kind of a nice way to do business.
Yeah, and I think, depending on where you're at in business, some of that stuff may sound like really cool or really overwhelming. For me, it mostly sounds really overwhelming because it's like, you already have this base of customers. But I do definitely concur that starting earlier and earlier in the process is better. And for a larger business, there is at least some incremental nature to that. Like I was having this conversation with my GM just today on the phone, where we were talking about how great our people are now, and how that took a while because you have, like, I had super bad habits 7 years ago, and so I taught the guy who rode with me super bad habits, and then he taught the next person super bad habits, and then all of a sudden I get super good habits and get on my high horse and start a podcast, and then I tell everybody now have super good habits, right? And then it takes a while for that to work its way down, and it happens with intentionality and it happens incrementally. But you can still do that, and I think starting earlier in the process, that's another example of that. It's like, so now when you hire somebody new, you put them with the guy who really does it the way you want it done, and now he does it the way you really want it done, he or she. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels there in business. But from a building science standpoint, depending on your location, your environment, that sort of thing, I think there are some key things you can start with. That you're just going to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do now, and we are going to do this. We may not be perfect, but we are going to start doing this. And maybe that's as simple as that initial conversation. For us, that's humidity is a really big focus there. But for other marketplaces, it may be, blower door is a really big one that I think maybe matters more some places than others, but it's a really big one that companies need to start implementing.
Just going to say you're wrong.
You're gonna say I'm wrong. I knew you would. We have this podcast. Go back and listen to that one.
Another easy one that we started with was the big air drop, right? So improvements around the equipment, improve the static pressure, doing things that don't have to be undone later. Those are good starting.
Yeah, get the airflow right first time. Well, it's like, especially in new construction, you only got one chance to do it correctly, because then it's terrible to fix forever, right? It's going to be difficult to repair and fix and make correct if you don't do it the first time forever. But it's kind of like what we were just talking about. We're establishing a brand new playing field for the homeowner. I mean, because we're talking about concepts that they have never thought about before. So there is, like you said, there's a relationship. You have to build trust there, because you have to kind of lean pretty heavily. This is why I like the chapter so much, on consumer education, rather than just trying to sell the product. Which, I mean, I would probably concur with Tyler that if he was just trying to sell a product that was super uber expensive, and that he could do other things, but there was no real education there for the homeowner, it would be very, very difficult. So, but by taking tax on humidity, things like that, educating the consumer, you are establishing a brand new playing field for the entire home owner market.
Can I just play off that for a minute?
Sure.
So one of the things I look forward to most is a literal playing field, almost figurative still, but so like John Semmelhack, who's a good friend of mine down in Charlottesville, Virginia, who's one of the few others that does fairly deep retrofits like what we do in our practice. He just put his energy use through our calculator for one of his projects. And I look at it, it's just a little bit lower than ours, but wait a minute, he's at the climate zone. And I'm just like, I'm ready to trash talk. Like, I'm ready to have fun, because we're going to be able to see different metrics from different companies and different techs, and be able to actually truly understand how our work actually falls out. I really look forward to that. I don't know how long it's going to be. Somebody's going to kick my butt real soon. So give it a couple of years.
I'm in line.
Great. Okay, Caleb.
I want to be in line.
I will help you do it.
Did you hear that, Bryan? It's good.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I mean, just being involved, it's good to have friendly competition, and we help each other and encourage each other. Like when we see someone, take Neil Comparetto for example. I see him post these really low duct leakage numbers and everything, and it's just like, to me, it's awesome, right? And just being able to encourage other folks and slap each other on the back and also want to beat his numbers, right? And so because I think, especially as most business owners, at least, we have this competitive edge, right? Or whatever, something inside of us has that most of the time, and so it's an interesting journey along the way, and to see people progress and move up, and to me, it's just awesome.
Is that why it's a slap on the back, not a pat on the back? Because you want to encourage them, but you're also in competition?
Yeah. I hope you felt that.
Yeah. So this last question, I think we could take forever on, but
Let's not.
Yeah. So moving into building science, and as we begin to scale it, and as it becomes more and more prevalent and important in the marketplace, what are your opinions on making sure that as we go forward with effectiveness, making sure that as we scale it, it's effective, but also being environmentally conscious, because we are, in fact, designing these houses and these buildings for human comfort and health. So specifically materials we use, the way we go about solving these issues for them, need to be human focused. Robert Bean calls it design for people, good buildings will follow, right? So what are some of your opinions on that particular thing as we move forward in advances in building science, making sure we are also environmentally conscious?
One of the things that most attracted me about the Energy Conservatory when I started working with the company is that I realized fairly quickly that, if you want to be honest about the politics in the United States, up to 50% of the people really care about saving energy. Okay, what percent of the people care about being comfortable? Way more. The good news is that almost all the time, if we provide better comfort, we're also going to be saving energy. And so that's something that I find really attractive, is that we don't have to be, every customer doesn't have to be concerned about saving the planet to save the planet.
So is your question pointed at, because you think a lot about, speaking to Kaleb, you think a lot about like how products are sourced and that sort of thing. Is that part of what you're asking?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you can talk about, we can open up a can of worms about spray foam if you want to, but I mean,
this is the thing. Like, so as you were asking that question, what's running through my mind is I don't care about any of that stuff. It's like, I think Stephen Rogers over there said it well, that this stuff is like a side effect for me, and so if we're talking about does this product have formaldehyde or high VOCs, to me, I want someone else to figure that out, and I'll take advice from somebody that I trust or whatever in that department, but not really my goal.
And all you have to know is what's the alternative to spray foam if the customer's concerned about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's multiple ways to skin the cat, right? And so you just shift somewhere else, or rely on the larger community as a whole of, hey, I've got this going on, what's a good solution here? And so I think building that community is brought, in my opinion, and the customer awareness is more important than a lot of those other details. If that makes sense.
See, that's the problem, is you want to skin the cat. Kaleb wants to provide it with an all-natural VOC-free hemp sweater. Gluten-free sweater. No, so I wouldn't, I'm not picking on you, yes I am, but I love you and you know that. And so, I get what you're saying, and I think as we think about healthy homes, how to keep our air pure, VOCs, things like that. That is part of this whole conversation. I mean, it is, because that's part of what we do. And when you start to think about those things, that does move its way into a lot of those environmental factors as well. It's not the whole story, but it's at least a good part of it. And it's funny, like when I grew up, it was like when we were all kids, it was like plastic bags were the good alternative because you weren't cutting down trees. And now we're supposed to use paper again, And it does. Those things shift over time as technology shifts, and it's good to have those forces in play to kind of remind us what the best options are and all that. But ultimately, we're not going to be good at everything. And I think for us to already be caring so much about building performance and building science in addition to being AC technicians, that's already a pretty big ask. Going much far beyond that gets a little difficult. But I think there are, because I've even talked about this, I think it would be really cool if people would look at total economic and environmental impact in products, even products that are brought in from overseas, and figure out how to do that math. I'm all for pragmatic solutions, even given the fact that, politically, I'm not going to say what I am politically, but that wouldn't fit. I think it's great if we can come up with good pragmatic solutions to those problems at scale. But for us, I think we're limited.
The math has to work, and you're asking that question, and I'm thinking like, oh geez, I don't want to figure that crap out. I feel like I second Housh, like somebody just tell me what to do. But also, like, I'll touch briefly on spray foam. Like not the environmental side of it, but if you are going to retrofit a house and get really good numbers out of it without killing yourself and the crew, spray foam is kind of the best tactic. In new construction, it's a whole other ballgame. But so it's going to depend from thing to thing what needs to happen, and then to shift it. So are you just trying to get me to talk about my shirt? Is that what you're trying to do so that we can make
can I
Sure,
shoot?
absolutely. No, that's the next thing.
Okay.
Can I shoot a question at you, Nate?
Yeah.
So this is something I legitimately don't know. What is the impact of if you just spray foam the cracks and put cellulose over it versus spray foam? Isn't that like way less spray foam and lower VOCs and not crazy amount more work?
It depends. So that's what we do. Yeah, mainly, yeah. It's bad mixes are what really screw things up. If you read the horror stories, when spray foam goes bad, it goes really bad. But it doesn't go really bad that often. It's a fraction of a percent. That's my train of thought.
I want to ask you a question while you're on it. I told Kaleb got really feisty with me when I told him that I still think the human nose is the best VOC detector on Earth. Wide range VOC detector.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, every time I have had a VOC complaint or an air quality complaint where somebody gets told the spouse, you're crazy, I go in and we notice something, we test something, but it's almost always real. So, yeah, I totally agree.
The female nose, let me clarify. The female nose.
Well, you know what?
Not so good for CO and CO2 though.
That is true. Very good point. Very good point.
But to come at it a different direction, two different things. So talk about natural refrigerants, because I'm glad they are coming, but it is kind of funny, like you give up one thing, and then you try to get one thing, you give up something else. So like almost all the natural refrigerants are flammable. They may have some other impacts to get a low GWP, or like I have a sanded CO2 water heater on my house. Like CO2 is an amazing refrigerant, but it makes either really hot or really cold, and it's not good for space conditioning. It just isn't a good refrigerant for it. But at least we're moving towards that stuff. But a friend of mine the other day commented, like, we really need to do something about this. So, like every 6 seconds, a new HVAC system in the U.S. is commissioned. Every 6 seconds. We're going to get there, but we still have to solve something today. And that's where, coming back to my shirt, it says electrify everything. And by the way, anybody who wants to use this logo can just go steal it. My wife did it. It's totally cool. But what we're doing with this is trying to move everything to be clean energy. So if you want to talk about air and water pollution, some of the biggest factors there are combustion, just burning things. Sorry, Jason. We will be talking afterwards. I've been looking forward to meeting you. How do you pronounce your last name, by the way?
Abjou.
What is it?
Abjou.
Okay. I was going to butcher that so horribly I didn't want to say it in the microphone, so hence I kept saying Jason. So everybody here probably knows that I'm huge on heat pumps, and the reason is they can run on electricity, and electricity is the only thing we're good at making clean. So to me, that's a very pragmatic path to get there. That doesn't require arguments that are going to get you into a fist fight with one side of the political spectrum or another. So does that help?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. I understand your point of view as far as you don't care. I do think it may still, though, be important to be aware, even if you're not implementing things. Be aware.
Yeah.
Just because having the mindset goes a long way.
Yes.
For sure.
And I'm going to appoint you to tell me what products to use.
Hey, here. There you go. Hey,
I still won't listen. I still won't listen, but I want you to tell me.
I like wool because it's carbon negative. You like cellulose is great.
Well, you keep saying wool, like you're literally talking the wool of a sheep.
Yes.
Like you're shearing a sheep and you're sticking it in your walls.
It's renewable, man.
Like,
It's because they'll die if you don't cut it off, Bryan.
oh, yeah. So they want to be shorn. I'm just saying, it seems a little odd to me.
Real quick, questions in the audience, of course, but I'd like to start real quick with Jason. If you could, I'm sure you have a couple of questions directed at Nate, because I know he mentioned just now that it's a clean energy, but we were just talking a little while ago about the process of getting electricity. So, yeah.
I mean, to generate enough electricity to meet the load, I mean, under the current grid, it would take an enormous undertaking to generate energy clean, to get off natural gas, to get off coal, and to get to solar, wind, however you do it. And if you're going to convert all these natural gas furnaces, boilers, combustion boilers to electric loads, you're going to double the current grid. So when you look at the grid now and say, what's it going to take to get sustainable with this grid? If you then take all of these heating units, you're going to double the current grid. So it's going to
What's it going to take for them to fix the grid?
to
Doubling
catch up.
taxing
Right.
the grid.
Well, I mean,
Right?
is there enough?
So you're not going to take all these houses and immediately make them all electric either. There's a
Right.
step,
It's,
a
what's the
sliding
process?
scale
Right.
that's going to
Yeah.
Well, how long?
Both of
we
these,
should
both of
summarize
these
By the
change.
time that happens, someone should summarize.
Yeah, that should be summarized. So,
All right, so to summarize it, Jason's saying that based on some of the math that he's looked at, that to go off of combustible natural gas and other types of oil, propane, whatever, well, but fossil fuels. That's the word I was looking for. Dang it! To go off of fossil fuels for comfort, you're going to have to double the size of the current electrical infrastructure. And what impact is that going to have environmentally, and is that even viable?
I can summarize this. The answer is you have to do the math. And if you do the math and you think, okay, what if we quadruple the rate we're adopting wind and solar? If we were to quadruple the rate, which is not realistic, we might be off of fossil fuels mostly in like 40 years. I mean, this is a long road. And so both of these are going to evolve over many decades, and they're going to evolve simultaneously as the heating, fuel source switches to electricity. The electricity generation can keep up. There's not going to be like a step change in either one of these. It's going to be gradual. Now it might ramp up faster. Yeah, it's going to take time.
it's going to take time. So, I mean, imagine if we started replacing 100% of furnaces today with heat pumps, which is stupid, frankly, in a lot of houses. They should be hybrids right now. They just should be, because the loads are too high. They really shouldn't have a furnace. If we started doing that today, it would still take 20 years. Replace about 5% of HVAC, give or take. Maybe it's much less, but it's in that ballpark. So, yeah, the grid will adapt. My goal would be that by 2030, we're almost entirely replacing either furnaces with hybrids or preferably furnaces with straight heat pumps, because we'll probably have better tech at that point. But it's going to take time. So I think that's the thing that people forget. And people watch the grid really, really closely, so it'll get upgraded as it needs it moving forward. It'll be okay. One of the best researchers, Dr. Chris Clack, of Vibrant Clean Energy, modeled Minnesota, which is probably the most difficult electrification climate, because their design temperature is -11. By the way, that's cold and whatever. That's awful. I don't know why you live there. Coming from Cleveland.
You got to come visit me.
I'll come up sometime. I'll come up. Yeah.
Maybe June, not January.
Yes, sounds good. Yeah, we can arrange that. But what he found was, and Jason, this might be interesting to you, the grid would need to be 1.57x the time that it is the size it is currently, and flow 2.25 times as much electricity to do full electrification. So that includes cars and transportation. Now, he did say that required quite a bit of load shifting and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm getting into the hyper geeky space that I play in on Twitter, as opposed to, frankly, the space that I prefer here with humans.
Aw. Sweet.
True story.
Thank you. Great. Any questions in the audience?
So, according to electrical, at least in North Carolina, it's essentially coal fired. So all of our electrical. So, what is the advantage of going from one fossil fuel to the other? What's the advantage?
So Tim was just asking, what's the advantage if you're in a coal-fired electrical grid? The answer is, can coal or can any fossil fuel get any cleaner how it burns? No. But is the grid getting cleaner because most new generation is clean? And the answer is yes. So if you go there, it at least can be clean. And like if you're really concerned about it, so Arcadia Energy will give you 50% free, 50% clean electricity for free. You have to pay extra if you want to go to 100%. And then if you have energy choice in your state, you can probably choose clean energy, which is what I do in Ohio. But it is funny, like I know in my mind it's made with coal, but my money is somewhere going to pay for a wind turbine.
Well, there's safety considerations too. I mean, as we build houses tighter, as we retrofit houses tighter, we have to be more careful about combustion safety, depressurizing the combustion zone. I don't know, in your neck of the woods, are natural vented water heaters indoors or in the garage? Okay, so if they're indoors, now you have to be worried about, am I backdrafting the water heater when I replace the HVAC system?
I mean, just briefly to that point, Steve, at least half the time when we do our retrofits and it has a natural draft water heater, it's okay before and it backdrafts after. And I hate having that conversation. It's like, congratulations, you get to spend a couple grand on a new water heater.
I think Tim had one more question.
So, you kind of went back and forth. So when you get away from fossil fuels, you electrify everything. Then heat pumps get rid of our 410A, go to propane. What have you done? What have we done?
Well, if propane is the refrigerant, at least you don't use it up and burn it, right?
Yeah, well, you hope not to. Yeah, there's a lot less propane burn when it uses refrigerant. I know, you're messing around. We had a great time in that class, man.
All right, awesome. Any closing thoughts? We're at time. Oh, Chris Bob.
So by the time you get to the point where you electrify everything, your load should be so much more than you have to worry about.
I'm not even repeating that thought. What do you think? So there's a question about the heat pump chillers. No, I'm not familiar with them. Whatever works. Like we try not to tell people what to do. It's just like, so here's the end goal. Get there however you want. I often joke, like, if you can fix a house by standing in the front yard, turning around 3 times, throwing a bat wing over your shoulder, at least you should teach me how. Please.
What they use one that you looked at was still on Fortnite and so forth.
On the topic of what we're talking about, I do think small tonnage, completely outdoor, self-contained chillers with flammable natural refrigerant like propane. I think that's the future.
Yes, I would
because
agree.
you can do all kinds of stuff. You can make it a heat pump. You can do reheat. You can do
domestic hot water.
Yeah, it's small.
all
Because then
this
you can have a
stuff.
really small charge, all contained outside. And then what's the argument? Everybody's like, "Oh, propane's dangerous." Well, it's all outside with your grill with a gigantic tank next to it. Stop complaining. You have no problem telling your 10-year-old, "Hey, go out, light the grill, son." And you're like, "Not propane refrigerant, though. That's going to kill us all." Would you stop it? R22 is not coming back. Stop complaining.
Emerson, I think, tell me, later, when they have determined the people out, they have a lot of natural refrigerant units that we're not putting on. And then they just put it in the food area. That's it. No, it's not CO2. It's natural refrigerant, like LP and that's going to be a swap out. Take it back to the shop. CO2 works.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.